shall we start our second session now?
Yeah, let's get going on this morning session.
Exactly, plenty to talk about fresh and dry.
Okay, right. So I need to share my screen. Hopefully that's coming up. Yeah. And Lizzie, you're going to start us off. So Lizzie is one of my colleagues at ProMars, you know, Jadranka, and Lizzie, you're going to start us off on the first few slides.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. And today we're going to talk about the UK fresh and dried fruit produce market and give you a little bit of an overview of what will be helpful for you to know if you were to access this market. So just to begin with, we thought we'd give a little bit of an overview in terms of who we are, who are speaking to you, in case you didn't join in last time. So ProMar is part of Genus. They're our parent company, and they're a genetics technology company, and they're active in over 70 countries and primarily operating in the porcine and bovine markets. ProMar, which is the consulting division that both myself and John are part of, provide a wide range of services to clients, both based in the UK and also overseas. We have a turnover about 30 million and 145 staff based in the UK, Germany and also Italy. The agri-food team, which John and I are both a part of, within that provide a range of services from market prioritisation studies to service evaluations, and we've worked within the Balkan countries. Myself, I've visited a number of those countries in the past, and I know John has as well. So hopefully we can bring some of that experience to the presentation that we're providing today and subsequent ones, and also be able to bring that to answer some of the brilliant questions that I know you'll ask throughout the presentation.
Next slide.
Yes, please, John. Thank you.
You just tell me, Lizzie, when you.
Sorry. Okay. And as well as John and myself, we're very lucky to be joined by Professor Chris Bishop, who is a lecturer at Lincoln University. Chris specialises within sort of the packaging sector, so he'll be able to bring some really good insight to that. And we've got a few slides from Chris later on in the presentation today. Thanks, John. So to start off with, we thought we'd just give a little bit of a recap in terms of what we import in terms of fresh produce. And as we touched on last time, the UK relies heavily on imports for its fruit and vegetables. As consumers, we're demanding a diverse offering and one that covers throughout the different seasons. So we want strawberries in December, we want bananas all year round. Obviously, we can't grow bananas over here, and we've got a climate that restricts what we can grow. Sort of tomatoes, we can grow them sort of in our gardens during the summertime, but when we want it year round, and for larger commercial production, it needs to be within greenhouses. As such, imports are really important to what we find in our supermarkets, and our top imports would include bananas, tomatoes, and apples, something that we will be eating all on a daily basis. And we're consistently being educated that we need to eat more fruit and vegetables. So our demand for these products will only increase further as our population continues to increase as well. And we're all driven to eat healthier products. So as you can see, we've got a wide range of products there, some of which will be produced from your countries as well. Thanks, John. In terms of imports, we showed this slide last time, but it's definitely worthwhile on pulling it up again. So this shows how our imports have changed over a 5-year period, so between 2016 and 2021, of our main imported products. And you can see for some of them, so the likes of tomatoes, apples and pears, there has been a small decrease in imports, something that's been replaced by domestic production, particularly sort of tomatoes, apples and pears. However, we're never going to be able to fully produce everything that we eat and become self-sufficient in fruit and vegetables. So the role that imports provide is really important. And for the likes of raspberries and strawberries, we continue to rely more and more on imports through the years. Thanks, John.
Yep.
And in terms of dried fruit. So this tends to be dominated by the bakery sector, both at home and within food processing. So sort of likes of hot cross buns, which are a seasonal product, as well as tea cakes, those kinds of elements all demand a lot of dried fruit. And then we have a big increase on the run up to Christmas as well, when we start eating the likes of like mince pies and Christmas cakes, which are all very heavily have a lot of dried fruit within them. Whilst imports have been declining, it still represents a very huge market. So you're at about, in 2021, about 90,000 tonnes of dried fruit we import. And all of this is basically imported because we don't really produce much at all. We produce some grapes, but that does tend to go for the wine market, and it's still at a very small scale. So it is dominated by imports. Turkey would be our leading importer, and they own one of the leading brands that you would see in the supermarkets, of which is called Whitworth's. Greece and other southern hemisphere countries also supply a lot of dried fruit to us. But as you can see, about 74% of the market is dominated by Turkey at the moment. That's okay, John.
Yeah, thanks for that sort of setting us off this morning, Lizzie. And before I hand over to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit about packaging, there's just I think one of the things that we've learned at Promar is the importance of what we call the service package. And I guess Jadranka, this presentation will be made available to people later on, so they don't need to sort of write everything down or make notes on everything we're saying.
It's very kind, John. Thank you for that.
But that's okay. But look, so we think that the overall service package of what people provide to the UK, that can include promotional support. People often think that promotional support is almost sort of the magic wand that allows them to access the market. But what we think is that the service package is made up of a number of things here, so having the right varieties at the right time of the year, having the correct logistics and the infrastructure to manage that, and Chris will talk about this a bit in a little bit, packaging, and then a consistent approach to pricing. One of the things that sort of the main importers in the UK and the supermarkets, what they look for is a consistent approach to pricing, rather than sort of this is what's caused them quite a lot of problem in the last sort of 18 months with this great volatility we're seeing in everything, in all costs, whether it's shipping costs or the cost of fertilizer or the cost of packaging or transport or distribution. Supermarkets in particular, they like consistent pricing, basically, which allow them to sort of plan ahead in a sort of an orderly fashion. So the service package, I think, you need to get everything right, basically. It sounds quite challenging, and I think it probably is, but you need to have the right varieties at the right time of the year, with the right logistics, with the right packaging, with the right pricing. And also these days, I think you need to be able to demonstrate the sort of sustainability and the provenance credentials of the source and supply as well. And that's sort of something that's become more important, I think, in the last few years, basically. But you need to get all these parts of the service package right. And if you've got one piece that is not quite right, you've got a weak link in the chain, basically. And that's maybe enough to make life very difficult for you, because there's lots of people. I mean, the good news is there's lots of people around the world have managed to perfect this service package offer, and they have got the right varieties at the right time of the year with the right packaging. So it's not impossible to do, but it needs a bit of thinking about, and it needs a bit of work. And Chris, you're going to talk to us. Thanks for joining us, Chris, this morning. You're going to talk to us a little bit about your area of expertise in particular, and it's one element of the service package about the importance of packaging and distribution in particular.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, John. Yeah, I think that the importance of the service package that you've just been describing just can't be overemphasized. You've really got to get all the things right. And one of the areas where people often try and save money is on packaging. Now, this may be that you are supplying a supermarket, and the supermarket specifies the actual punnet or bag or net that you're putting your product into. But you have got the decision over the carton and the actual how you palletize the product. And I regret to say that photos like you can see there are rather more common than we would like to admit. Now, I say I regret. If I'm personally honest, this gives me more work, gets me more money. So, you know, when people get problems like this, they call me in, and so I earn. But it's not nice to see. And basically, people try and save on the packaging. Now, it may be that a low quality cardboard carton is okay if we're transporting the product 100 kilometers, but it's not going to be okay if we're going to be transporting it halfway across Europe. We hope the roads are always nice and smooth, but if the vehicle has to brake a few times, things can get shaken about. And you see things like this. Now, to unload that container or truck is when you've got pallets at an angle, takes more time. Putting them into the warehouse is going to take more time. And we get the potential of the pallets collapsing and getting and being a total write-off. But even if it takes more time, that's very serious, because if you are supplying someone like Tesco's, they will sometimes say, right, we want the product to come to our distribution depot between 10 o'clock and 10:20. You've got a 20-minute window. If you arrive late, you are penalized by the minute. And if you find that one of the pallets that you're having to load is like one or two of these, you may not make your time slot. So you may lose the whole consignment. Now, this is fairly rare, but it does happen. So please, with, you know, when you're palletizing, with your cartons, etc., it really is important. You know, this is the area of packaging that people really don't think about very much. So can we I just want to sort of emphasize this is something which is important. And a number of countries trying to break into the British market have fallen down badly over the years in this particular area. John, could we have the next slide?
Yeah, so what we're saying there, Chris, in effect, is that sort of trying to cut corners or do things on the cheap is actually it's a false economy, as they say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's very well summarized.
Right. Oh, Chris, now the next slide. I don't know what's happened there. I do beg your pardon. Oh, what's happened there? We had it there this morning, didn't we?
We did.
Do you want to just talk about what you were going to talk about, Chris?
Basically, yeah. The other thing I was going to talk about really was actually in the actual transit of the product. If we're transporting in a truck, the temperature in that truck is not going to be the same in all parts of the truck. There's going to be variations. If you've only got a 1.5 degrees centigrade variation across the truck, you're doing a good job. And that's about as good as we can get. Because we're controlling the temperature by pumping air around the truck. The actual package itself can also make a big difference. If we've got one where we're transporting some grapes in a cardboard carton and we've got a bit of tissue paper and the grapes are in bags, etc., you're going to get very little airflow and therefore very little potential to control the temperature close to the actual product. If we've got slatted boxes or cartons, it's much better. We can get much more airflow. This may dry the product out if it's too much, but unlikely coming in from the Western Balkans, so that we've got a better control of our temperature. So the actual packaging, even if we load our truck at the right temperature, controlling the temperature, making sure it arrives at the right temperature, the packaging makes a difference. And if you are supplying many of the British companies, one of the things that it may check on arrival is the temperature. And they know where are the weak points in a truck when it arrives. Where are the areas where you're most likely to get a problem? To be honest, one of the reasons they know that is because I've done various training courses with them and tell them where the worst points are. So they will check that. So it is important to make sure those temperatures are right, and the packaging can make a big difference to whether we get that right or wrong. Okay.
The good news there, Chris, is that all these things are manageable with the
Exactly.
right,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, so the technology and the systems exist to do this and make sure that produce does arrive on time, in the right condition, with the right packaging, with the right sort of temperature control regimes in lorries. It's all perfectly possible, but again, it doesn't happen just by accident, does it?
No, it doesn't happen. We come back to what you were talking about earlier, John, the service package. And these are just all parts of the service package.
Yeah.
And if we try and, you know, if the logistics isn't right, it doesn't matter how good some of the other bits are, we're going to have problems.
Yeah.
It's you know, when I think emphasizing the service package is all the factors put together. It's not so we just can choose which ones we do.
Yeah.
Okay, John, back
Okay,
over to
Chris,
you again.
thanks very much indeed. So I think the next few slides are myself, Lizzie, and then back to you in a minute or so. But so in terms of, yeah, we talked about the leading importing companies in the UK, and again, sort of a Jadranka at some stage you either you'll discover them who they are yourselves, or we can help introduce you to some of the people that you might want to talk to at some point in the future. But I think there's some things here about the nature of these companies, that they're often very well informed. As I said, when we talked on Tuesday, we talked about the fact that the UK is buying from literally all around the world. Virtually every country in the world supplies the UK with something. So these companies tend to be very well informed about the sources of supply and the key varietal and post-harvest technology developments, and not least Chris's comments on packaging and distribution and temperature control. This is what these companies are thinking about on a day-to-day basis. For new suppliers, they will undertake a number of audits before they even begin to start dealing with a new supplier. This may well apply to the companies in southeastern Europe, Jadranka. So they particularly if they're supplying the supermarkets, there's a lot of reputation at stake. And they don't want to risk that reputation by dealing with people on a sort of speculative basis. They want to know exactly who they're dealing with and what they're going to get and how they're going to get it, basically. And in many cases, they only, I can remember talking to one of the leading companies, and I was talking to the managing director, this is a couple of years ago, and he said, John, we used to have we used to supply all 7 or 8 leading supermarkets in the UK. And I said, and there's been this sort of process of consolidation in the UK and other European markets as well. And he said, now we have 2.5 customers. So 2 major customers, and then somebody they did some business with. However, he said, but he talked about having 2.5. We only have 2.5 customers. So the relationships are probably much closer as a result. The trading relationships are much closer. But again, the important, when you've got 8 customers, maybe you could afford to lose one. But when you only got 2 customers, you can't afford to lose one of those customers. So the relationships are well protected and well developed and well guarded. And it's unlikely that you would supply, as I said here, if you were supplying both. It's unlikely you would supply both Marks and Spencers and Waitrose that have historically been operating at the sort of higher value end of the market, or you would supply both Asda and Tesco, or both Lidl and Aldi. You would tend to sort of have customers that are not in direct competition with each other, basically. And these companies, again, over a period of time, and we'll just show an example coming up, they've invested considerable sums of money in modern packing and storage and distribution facilities, and then they're often involved in producing or as well as providing the physical fruit to go into the stores, whether that's coming from Spain or Italy or the Southeast Europe or Asia or Latin America. They also provide additional services for their customers, such as market research and analysis and sort of category management and category planning type skills as well. That's all part of the job that they provide.
I think something happened with John's.
This is a company.
Are you back?
AM from.
Sorry, John. For the moment, we lost you. For 10 seconds,
okay.
15.
Okay, but so this is AM Fresh in the Midlands in the UK. This is their new pack house distribution centre. They supply mainly Tesco, the Co-op, and Marks and Spencers, who between them account for about 40% of the overall UK market. And they will specialise in certain products for these customers. But this new facility will have cost them £100 million. So as they say, the sort of sums of money that are involved are considerable. And as we said, that before these sorts of companies will deal with a new supplier, will carry out these audits and checks. And they don't want to be, they can't afford to be speculating on what they're doing. They need to know exactly who they're dealing with and what they're going to be doing with them going forward. Lizzie, are you going to take over from here? Or am I going to do one more?
Lizzie, we don't hear you. You're mute. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I can do this if you want to, John.
Yeah.
Or...
Okay, why don't you take over from here, Lizzie, for the next few slides, and then we'll come back to me a bit later on.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. So basically, whenever you're supplying into supermarkets or kind of a lot of suppliers in the UK, they want to protect their customer base, and they want to make sure that what they're providing to their customers is fully assured, so they know there's not going to be anything wrong with them that can cause bad publicity or bad PR for them. As such, a lot demand certain accreditations on producers and exporters, and some of these are listed below in terms of what they would like to see. So there's Global GAP for farmers, LEAF for farmers, which is sort of out there. There's BRC for pack houses, and SALSA for very smaller producers, SEDEX for the businesses, and then there's the different elements of sort of initiatives, sort of like the fair trade and the organic, which are there when there is appropriate. And there's sort of big markets out there for those kinds of things. So organic still has a strong hold in the UK market. It's somewhat dependent on how sort of wealthy consumers are feeling. Inflation's at a high rate now, so potentially organic sales aren't as high as they have been. And then there's fair trade, and a lot of fair trade is just attached to a lot of products such as chocolate and bananas. Consumers know how they're produced, and they want to make sure that the producers are getting a fair amount of money back for them. And then supermarkets will have specific standards for themselves to protect themselves, once again, making sure that there shouldn't be any bad things that come back to them, and they will go out around to numerous countries and be checking those standards, and there'll be a port of call, really. I was talking to a supermarket last week on a different call, the Co-op, and they're a small they're a nationwide chain, but they tend to be on the smaller convenience type supermarkets, and we were talking on a Welsh project for them, which is a UK devolved nation, and basically they won't talk to anybody if they haven't got SALSA accreditation. That's a minimum. So some of these accreditations, if you haven't got them, the door's permanently closed for you. So it is definitely worth looking into what these guys are demanding, because if you don't hold them, then the door won't even be open for a conversation with them, really. In terms of the retail market, so we touched on last time, the UK retail sector is really well developed, and it's dominated by large operators. Unfortunately, the likes of butchers and greengrocers, their markets have badly declined in recent years. I think they've got a good niche there now, sort of, and they've got quite a strong hold, but the chances of them going back and growing again are very minimal, and they've been sort of replaced by the likes of Tesco's and Sainsbury's, who, with the top four of which hold about 75% of the market. And as you can see, actually, over the sort of the last 5 years, the big players have been really challenged, and they've been challenged by the likes of Aldi and Lidl, so the discounters, to which have become quite fashionable to shop in, really, and the growth in them has caused these larger retailers to lose a bit of market share, but also review their product line. So they've looked at reducing the number of SKUs that they've got within their their supermarkets, so to reduce cost, and they've also made sure that they've got many different tiers. So if you go into Waitrose, which is a high-level supermarket, you know, and quite an expensive one, they've got an essentials range which would have pricing points that compete against the likes of Aldi and Lidl. Thanks, John. Fruit and veg is central to UK retailers. As soon as you walk into the supermarket, you tend to walk straight into the fruit and vegetable aisles, and they're bright, they're colourful, and retailers really do push them and want them to look appealing to customers. Yeah, it's a big part of them. You know, there'll be sort of a good sort of section of the supermarket dedicated to it, and unfortunately independent greengrocers have declined as a result of this. That they're just not there at the moment for us. Consumers just want to go to one place and do all their shopping. They haven't got necessarily time to go to the butchers, the greengrocers, and buy all their different products. And there's a wide range of fresh produce on offer. So if you can see there, you're looking at the sort of the soft citrus element of the supermarket there, and you can see how many different types of oranges, easy peelers. You've got ones that they can pick and put into their own bags. You've got the pre-packed versions. You've got the top tier. So let's say the sort of like taste the difference, which would be the really premium end down to the essentials range. So consumers have a really good pick of what they can have and what they want to take home.
I think it's fair to say, Lizzie and Chris, that, you know, supermarkets look to differentiate themselves on a number of different issues, but fresh produce is one of the sort of flagship products they have in stores, and they often judge themselves how well they're doing by how well their produce section is doing, and therefore there's huge attention paid to it. And then that also means there's huge attention paid to the companies that are supplying them, basically. So fruits and vegetables are, you know, it's a profitable part of the overall retail business. As Lizzie said, there's been a decline in the independent retail sector over quite a long period of time, but fruits and vegetables could not be more important to supermarkets. I think is a key message here, which I think is good news. It's good news. It means that what you do is important for a retailer. Lizzie, back to you.
Yes, so in terms of dried fruit, so it tends to be stocked slightly separately to the fresh produce area, although you will find some dried fruit, probably along with nuts, in the fresh produce sector. But diverse range on offer, and different packaging formats. So you've got individual snack packs, ideal for sort of lunch boxes. You've got ones that would be covered in yogurt. You've got ones that would be covered in chocolate. Then you've got sort of resealable packs. You've got little cardboard packs. You've got both private label and you've got a supermarket own label. The Whitworth's product, which we mentioned earlier, so that's the one that's owned by a Turkish company and bought out, but you know, by reading it you'd think that it's, you know, a very sort of English kind of name and buy into, and a wide range of products. So it's not just sort of raisins and sultanas. You've got sort of the dried apricots, cranberries, a range of different ones which we're all being marketed at to buy more of, really. And in terms of the wholesale markets, the number of wholesale markets, and I'll come on to that in a minute, have condensed over the recent years. It's been a result of supermarkets now working directly a lot more with suppliers, but they have sustained in popularity, and that's been driven a lot by the eating out trend, which is very big in the UK, you know, and there's been a great amount of investment in wholesale markets as well to ensure that they remain fit for purpose, and that, you know, they're based at a lot of the large transport links, and they're, you know, they're being worked on and invested in. We've done a number of different projects looking at them and making sure that we're speaking to the people that use them and the people that are involved with them to make sure that they're doing what's right, and if any improvements can be made, really. And the fresh produce is a key kind of sector for these wholesale markets. But as I say, these then end up having to supply out to independents and the food service market more than going straight into the large retailers.
Probably the best known wholesale market, Jadranka, is in London. There's three in London, which is slightly unusual. There's not many cities in the world have got 3 wholesale markets for fruits and vegetables.
That's correct, John. I didn't know. That's interesting.
So, but New Covent Garden, which is almost in the centre of London, that is maybe the best known. And what have you? And if your companies are coming to the IFE event in London, they should go to New Covent Garden Market, there's 2 others in London. New Covent Garden is probably the biggest, and it's probably the best known, and it's probably the easiest to visit. And again, they're quite used to having international visitors come and tour the market, but it would give your companies a fantastic opportunity to see the range of products that are being sold to UK customers, and the range of countries. And a visit there would take 2 or 3 hours, and we can help organise that if you'd like. And
I would like that, John, very much.
I think they would learn as much. They would learn as much in 2 or 3 hours at Covent Garden as they would maybe listening to us for the rest of the year.
Shame on you, John.
I mean that. Yeah, well, no, I do. I think they would learn an awful lot from going to hopefully they'll learn from listening to Promar and Chris Bishop and 1 or 2 other people. They would learn a morning at Covent Garden would be, I think it'd be an eye-opening experience, as they say.
Can I just really support that? I would fully agree with that. I sometimes spend a morning at New Covent, not with anything specific in mind, but I always find that just by talking to people, seeing what's on offer, you learn an awful lot. It really is something I would thoroughly recommend.
We could help organise that.
Promar would be very good at doing that.
Thank you very much, John. We'll talk about that this afternoon or tomorrow. Thank you, John.
Sorry, Lizzie, we interrupted.
No, you're okay.
Oh, sorry, Lizzie.
No, don't have. And as you can see, so these are the locations of the main wholesale markets in the UK now. They used to be about 30, and now they've condensed to about 15. And as you can see, they are mainly based around ports, so the likes of Bristol, Southampton, they're all near major ports, but then also near major transport links as well, and large cities really, so that all those those big independents and food service businesses can get into them quite easily, and they'll be near major transport links. So the likes of Birmingham, there's a number of large motorways going up and through there, linking into Manchester and Birmingham. So that's where they would be located, and in a brilliant location for those independent businesses to go and buy what they want to. And they're all open, first thing in the morning. These markets kind of are quiet after sort of 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. They're the busiest at sort of 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, when people are going out and buying the produce that's fresh to be used that day, really. Thanks, John.
Is this you, Lizzie? Or
I was going to give a hand over to you now, if that's okay, John.
Okay, yeah. So I think one of the thanks, Lizzie, for that. I think one of the things that is a real key driver, and we touched it a little bit on Tuesday. We've mentioned it as it's now part of the service package. So you've got varieties and packaging and transport and logistics and pricing and promotion, but also you've got to be able to demonstrate your sustainability credentials, and sort of where's all this coming from? Well, I think it starts right at the top with sort of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 of them. I think 13 of them apply directly to agriculture and food. So the role of agriculture and food in sort of meeting the Sustainable Development Goals as set out by the United Nations is absolutely critical. And trying to understand all the implications of this is quite a challenge, I believe. But it starts with the UN Sustainable Goals. These are what governments have agreed to, and they set themselves ambitious targets. We'll have in the UK, we're saying we'll have a carbon neutral society or carbon neutral economy by 2040. My understanding is that even countries that are making good progress on this thing, there's still lots of work to be done, and there's some countries have made almost no progress on this. So yeah, still a big challenge. But also, as well as governments buying into this sort of development of a more sustainable, more environmentally friendly supply chain and economy in general. You've also got the leading supermarkets, much the same thing, major suppliers around the world, again, whether they're in Europe or whether they're in Latin America or parts of Africa, wherever they are, the leading players are all making these sort of big commitments that they want to reduce their carbon footprint. Consumers are interested in this sort of thing. Well, you know, I think there's a bit of a debate sometimes, Jadranka, about, you know, do consumers understand all the issues around reducing carbon footprints? I think some consumers do. I think some consumers are very well informed on this. I think many consumers are probably less well informed, but it sounds good. It sounds the right thing to be doing. And again, if you read the newspapers, if you read, you know, watch television, there's lots of coverage on this sort of thing. So I think consumers know. They may not understand all the technicalities of what's going on, but they know it's a good thing to be doing, basically. And then you've got the non-governmental organizations are very involved in this type of thing as well. And so it's a supply chain issue right across the supply chain, whether you're in the UK, whether in the rest of Europe, whether you're in Asia, Latin America, or the Western Balkans, you know, everybody, you know, there's no, you know, it won't be, oh, we want people to be sustainable in the UK, but it doesn't really matter what they're doing in the Western Balkans. You know, in the UK and I think around the world, you know, everybody will have to be sustainable, whether the produce is coming relatively short distances, maybe 50, 100, 200 miles, you know, from within the UK, or whether it's coming from the other side of the world. People in the UK, the government, supermarkets, consumers, NGOs, everybody we want everybody to be sustainable going forward. And then sometimes people say, so okay, so what does that involve? And it can involve a whole range of things. So you know, at some point in the future, when companies from Southeast Europe, Western Balkans come to the UK and start talking to potential customers, the customers will start asking them about what are your plans for sort of climate change mitigation? What, you know, do you have a policy on water or plastics usage and pesticide reduction? What do you have plans for things like reducing food waste? What are your plans? One of the big issues for farming companies is, you know, what are the plans to try and enhance soil management? Do you have a policy on biodiversity? Do you have statements, or can you prove things like modern slavery? This is a big issue in the UK. Jadranka, and it's not just in sources of supply. It's interesting, I was talking to a company in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and they said it's a bigger issue in the UK about how we're treating our labor in the UK as it is in any other part of the world. We were talking about Latin America, and they said, look, you know, there are concerns about Latin America and how labor gets treated, but he said we have to be very careful in the UK. That he said in the UK, our track record is not always great on this sort of thing. So we need to be as vigilant about this in the UK as we do in any other part of the world. Use of child labour, these sorts of things, staff training, development, and then engagement with the local community. These are all part. I think this is almost like a tick list of what a good sort of sustainability plan might look like. There's quite a lot there. Most companies tend to pick a few things to begin with and say, right, we're going to make sure we're really strong and well organized on a few things, and then we'll move on to other things. But at some point, all these things will be asked about by companies in the UK when they start to look to buy from your companies and your colleagues, Jadranka.
So it's very important, John. This is a checklist before you even start to think about Britain.
Well, I don't think you have to have.
It's important.
Yeah, they're all important. It's a bit of a checklist. I don't think you have to. I don't think the expectation is you have all those things in place day one. But the companies in the UK that you end up talking to will start mentioning these things and saying, do you have a plan on plastics reduction? Do you have a plan on soil management? Do you have a plan on child labour and what have you, or these sorts of issues? And at some point they will, part of their auditing process will be to come and check what you're doing.
Well, it's important if you would like to have a partner, any UK company working with, let's say, any Western Balkan countries, company, they would really would like to know, because that influences their auditing, because they would like to know if the companies they're working with actually support sustainability, which is FAO is project for United Nations, which we are working today. So
absolutely. I think the thing to understand is it's not just something we're asking of people in Southeast Europe or the
everywhere, I believe.
The supermarkets and the leading players in the UK market, they're asking these sorts of questions as much of their UK suppliers, if not more, basically.
Sorry, can I just say one other thing, is that I think you sometimes find that some companies are doing some of these things and have been doing them for years, but don't actually present the information. There was one I was dealing with, and they used to give food to the local school on a regular basis, and they'd done that for years. But then if you start looking at this, that's a community engagement project. But they didn't really sort of look at it as ticking one of these boxes, because it's something they'd always done. So sometimes I think you find that people are doing some of these things, but they're not promoting the fact that they're doing it.
Yeah, I think, again, Chris, I fully agree there. I remember being in India a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, and we were working with a big fruit processing business there. They were doing quite a lot of these things already. And when we started talking about this, they were surprised. They said, well, we've been doing these sorts of things, they're good things to do. Why wouldn't we do them in the first place? But if we need to sort of present them in a broader context, then we can do that. But we've been doing many of these things already. They just seem sensible things to do. And we want to do them. We want to do them. We want to train our staff well. We want to look after our employees and what have you. So as you say, sometimes companies are perhaps doing these things without even realizing it, but they are all issues that will get more attention in the future. And I think when it comes to promotion, we've talked about as part of the service package, not only varieties and packaging and the logistics and all these, promotion is an important part of this. So this is what the South African dried fruit industry do in the UK. They have a very visible campaign aimed at both trade and consumers, and in some ways it's quite a simple message, isn't it? And they're right. South Africa is a beautiful country, but we also know that in the Western Balkans, Jadranka, there's some beautiful parts of the world as well. So, but
magical,
what do they say?
Really, it's only 2 hours from the UK, two and a half on the plane.
Yeah. What do they say in South Africa? Beautiful fruit from a beautiful country. That's it's quite. We're
all proud what we have, aren't we?
Everybody's proud of what they have,
course.
basically. But in South Africa, they're particularly proud of this. That again, but again, it doesn't mean that they can get away with the wrong variety or the wrong packaging or the wrong pricing or the wrong logistics. Or if there's a weak spot, this will be less effective, basically. But this sort of promotion of the source of supply is quite important. I think, at some point, maybe the countries that you're working with there, Jadranka, may need to be thinking about this.
The more I listen to you, John and Chris and Lizzie, I'm thinking how many actually, what you have to do before actually to get in the UK market. There are lots of questions to be answered.
Yeah, well, just a couple of last slides coming up, Jadranka. I think here's it's interesting sort of, what's the value of the product when it gets to retail level. There's often quite a lot of debate about, well, this is what it costs in a supermarket to buy. How much does the grower get? And sort of essentially often where does the money go between the retailer and the consumer and the grower? And there's lots of work being done on that, and we can talk about that later on, Jadranka. But if you work it out, if you look at the value of dried fruit in the UK at retail level, it can be up to 14 kilos, 14 pounds a kilo. Fresh fruit it's a big market, but it's relatively low value, I suppose, compared to other forms. Compared to frozen or juice products or or cut fresh products, which is sort of products that have been sliced and packed and often used in a snacking capacity, basically. But yeah, the difference in the value between fresh produce at the per kilo and dried and cut fresh and frozen is it's only when you do this sort of thing, this sort of exercise is actually quite interesting. It might give you some guidance on which bit of the market you want to focus on, or maybe you need to be in more than one part of the market, and what have you. But yeah, this sort of exercise I think is quite useful to do. And then we sort of talk about okay, so what are the success factors? I mean, I think one of the encouraging things, it can sound incredibly complicated and sophisticated and challenging and difficult, and parts of this process is or are, but as Chris sort of said, there's lots of countries around the world have over a period of time have managed to understand how to supply the UK market and the technical and commercial trends that are at play here, and what companies need to do to be successful. So I think, if you were sort of saying again, another checklist, you need to have program supply, and by that we mean this idea that the key importers in the UK, they don't want to be speculating on their suppliers about what they're going to send and when they're going to send it. They need to know on a Monday morning, for example, that we're going to have 20 tons or 40 tons or 60 tons of fruit turning up, and it's going to be of a certain specification, of a certain variety, and they're going to know what price they're going to pay for it before it's even left the West Balkans. It's got to be of good quality. You need to have the right varieties, right, and you need to have the varieties that the market wants, rather than maybe the varieties that you just happen to grow. In again, be it in South Africa or Chile or Peru or in Southeastern Europe, you need to have this category plan for how you see the business going forward over the next few years. You need to have great logistics. You need to have some sort of promotional activity at some point, and that can be above the line and below the line type activity. Reliability is maybe the most important thing of all. That you are a reliable supplier, and that I think all customers like to feel they're special. So reliability, do what you say what you do, and this sort of thing. They are really, really important, and a focus on the UK market. That the UK market is a big priority for, again, whether the company's in Southeastern Europe or Spain or Italy or Peru or South Africa, that the UK is a real focus for them, and that the attitude isn't, well, we'll be in this market, we'll be out of the market, we'll be in the market, we'll be out of the market. The companies in the UK want a sense that you are focused on them and focused on the UK market, and that you will be able to demonstrate this sort of reliability. Prices are hey, there's not a market in the world where price isn't important. So it doesn't mean to say you've got to be the lowest price, but you need to have a competitive price. So understanding this is where perhaps going to a wholesale market would be incredibly useful, because you'd see the various quality and types of produce there, but also it's a very transparent way of looking at the market. You can ask people what the price is, and they will tell you, basically, so you can get a good feel for what sort of target prices you might be aiming to reach. And then, as Lizzie said, investment in infrastructure, and that could be BRC. We'd also expect things like HACCP. SALSA is a scheme mainly for local suppliers in the UK, but it can be applied to people in other parts of the world as well. But investment in infrastructure, modern, safe, clean, efficient pack houses in particular, and then I said, having a sustainability plan and being able to demonstrate high levels of corporate social responsibility, some of which you might be already doing without even perhaps realizing you're doing it, which is good news. But again, there's quite a checklist there of things that need to be in place, and that can sometimes seem a bit daunting, but the reality is that around the world, many countries have been able to do this, Jadranka, whether it's Kenya or South Africa or Turkey. We were talking about, Turkey is a fantastic again, if you wanted to look at an example of a country that's done really well in supplying the UK market, not only with fresh but also with dried products as well, look at what they've done in Turkey over maybe the last 25 years. And
not overnight, not in 1 year, I suppose.
No,
it's long, but it's not.
But I think once they decided what they've accelerated the growth of what they've done, and so although the checklist is quite long, it's not impossible for companies who really want to do this. It's not impossible to do, and there's lots of companies around the world in many countries around the world. Lots of companies in many countries have understood how to do this, and so the track record of people doing it and doing it successfully is strong. But you've got to get everything, you've almost got to get everything right. But if you wanted to look at a country that have done really well, both in fresh and dried, Turkey would be a great country to go.
Well, it's our next neighbor, not next to, but very close, and we have very good relationship. All Western Balkans with Turkey, so we might learn something from them and us.
And so I think those are the so look, as somebody said to me once, John, you're making it sound very simple when you list the success factors. And my reply, Jadranka, was I can make it sound much more complicated if you like me to. But in some ways it is quite, this is it's quite a long checklist, but it is quite, what you need to do is not a secret. It's whether you can do all these things over a period of time. And I think, again, maybe Jadranka, that sort of takes us to the end of this morning's session, but obviously we'll take questions. I think I can see some questions in.
Shall I wrap nicely, then we go to the questions? From everything I heard today, all of our audience, it seems I just wrote something down, which is key to the successful export. I'm talking about Western Balkans companies. It's actually to fulfill the key success factors, not because they're difficult or not, they're rules. Even though when you drive on the road and you come to Britain, you have to follow the rules on the right side or wherever you go. So to be successful, I'm afraid some people don't like the rules, but the rules are there to be followed and to succeed. So this is for me kind of what I see. It's not difficult, but needs to be done. Number two, John, Chris and Lizzie, what I notice of our audience, they keep asking me all the time kind of questions. And I know you might not be able to give me an answer today, but this whole region, has an incredible long hours of sunshine, good soil, lots of good fresh fruit and vegetables. And before Brexit, pretty much we were working quite a lot with European Union. So for example, Germany, Middle East, Italy, Austria, they're all dealing and trading with Western Balkans companies. So the question is how they're not that far from Britain, just crossing the channel. Where do we start? Do we start from the beginning? And let's say tabula rasa, we start now. Yes, UK market is new to us. Let's follow those success factors. Let's introduce us. And I believe that the trade shows are very good fairs where you present the flavor in your jar. So you bring, unfortunately, fresh fruit and veggie we can't bring, it's not the season. We'll invite them all to visit our region. But you see, John, this is a conundrum. How happened that British market doesn't know much about it? And I think it's a good way, start from zero and do it right. What is your view, John, Liz and Chris, on this? This is kind of, for me, I've been receiving questions all the time and I don't have an answers. We are doing all our best as a chamber, bilateral chamber, but there are more to answer to that. I'm sure we can't do all today.
Lizzie, do you want to share some thoughts on that maybe to start with? And then Chris?
Where were we doing wrong?
I don't think you're doing anything wrong. You're still at the start, so you haven't been able to do anything wrong so far.
Oh my God. That's a good one, thank you.
And I think it's fair to say there will be some, as they say, Jadranka, there'll be some, it won't always, if it was easy, everybody would be doing this, but so there'll be some times where as I say, there's some, the road will not always be totally straightforward. But Lizzie, do you want to just comment on?
Yeah, I think it's a case of getting to know the market and understanding it as a startup. So John touched on them last time. So understanding what's going on over here, the political situation, and then coming over and starting to meet people and understand the market. So go to the wholesale markets, go around the supermarket so you can really get a feel for them, see what the products are like, and then get to those trade shows that you can start getting and speaking to those kinds of people and asking questions and starting to understand. And also you can tell them then about your story, show them your products. And it's kind of just slowly breaking down those barriers. It's not going to happen overnight. It might not happen in the first year, but it's a longer process. And if you keep chipping away at it, then in the end you'll get there and you'll get the success, really. You've just got to make sure you've got a good product that's in good quality and able to supply in the volumes that the buyers and the retailers over here are wanting them, so that you become a sustainable partner for them to work with, really.
Yeah, if I could just add on to that, I think, going to something like New Covent Garden is very useful, really useful. If people have time, I think it's worth going to one or two of the other wholesale markets in other parts of the country, because although they're all similar, they can vary. And I can think of one company who visited Newcastle wholesale market and realised there were just about no pineapples going to Newcastle, and they were all the ones there were rubbish. So they targeted, as the first place that they were selling their pineapples was the Newcastle area. And they did very well out of it. It got them that foothold in there. So I think to go around, to look at all the different supermarkets, I noticed there were 1 or 2 questions on things like jams. Well, look at the various labels that there are, and then probably then to talk to people like Promar or ourselves or whatever, or myself, who is producing their jams? Where are they getting the product from? Is it that they're actually, they're importing the made jam, or is it actually being made here? But actually having looked at the supermarkets and the wholesale markets.
But also British have a different taste for the jams, as we know.
Yeah, exactly.
It is something where I learned when I came here 25 years, I couldn't believe, it's complete. We grew up with different tastes. We grew up where from our mom and family, what we ate, and who we are today is actually how we grew up, isn't it? What we had as a child, and that memory stays, sense and taste in our mind. But British people are very explorative. They like to travel. They like to try new things. But takes time. So I believe they would like to know. They never tried. Once the few of our products we had in front of them last year at IFE, we had 5 companies, and they were like, "My God, this is interesting. Oh, what is it?" This time we have 21 companies, 10 from FAO, 11 from other parts of Serbia, which are coming, they already signed. So I believe we will have a lot to offer, but takes time. It takes time for British people to.
I think the other thing to
understand, isn't it? I don't know if is that the right way to say it.
I think one thing I would say, Jadranka, is it's probably easier now to find out about the UK market than ever before, not least through social media. But if you wanted to look and see what Tesco, what range of jams Tesco had in store, you can go online. You could do it from, wherever you are in the world. You could do it, you can be in New Zealand, or you could be in Southeast Europe, you could be in Latin America. You can go and find out, you can go and see what they have. You can do all this online, and that's some of your initial homework. I think when buyers in the UK, when they talk to suppliers, I think they almost expect them to know a certain amount already. I don't think they expect them to know everything and what have you, but I think any company coming from Southeast Europe, from the West Balkans to the UK, they should do a little bit of homework beforehand and sort of show that they've taken the trouble to find out a bit more about, rather than sort of asking everything from point zero when they get in front. You don't want to be asking your customer all the everything right from zero. that they almost expect you to have done some preparation work. Again, maybe this is where the Chamber of Commerce could help, or
we'll make sure, John.
Yeah, and they expect the level of preparation to all be done, rather than just sort of turning up in the UK and sort of saying, hey, we don't know anything really, we're going to ask everything of you. They expect you to have done some homework, as they say. I think the other thing, some consumers, you're right, some consumers in the UK are very experimental and willing to try anything, and some consumers in the UK are incredibly conservative, and I use the small c and what have you. And so again, so the idea, there are 66 million of us here in the UK. We don't all act and behave in the same way. So again, it's all about knowing the customer, knowing the consumer, and so on, and finding out what people like, what I like. Lizzie,
it is what the market likes, what your product is, and not what you like. It's not about you.
What I might
want, I mean, our product.
Yeah. What I might want to buy, Lizzie might not. There can be all. Sometimes the differences can be slightly geographically based, or it can be age or gender based. But we're not, so different consumers in the UK will like different sorts of, or prefer different types of products. There's a great question here about using green energy.
Shall we go back now to the questions, John?
I'd say on green energy, Lizzie, you might want to say something as well, but yeah, look, the use of green energy or renewable energy is, again, that's the sort of thing that a customer in the UK would be interested in hearing about, I think. And anything you can do, if it's a way in which you can reduce your carbon footprint, and if it's done through use of green energy, then that's good news. That's a good news story. Again, is it the magic bullet that answers all the issues around climate change? No, I don't think it is, basically, but it's part of the answer, and I think that's the sort of thing, again, that customers would want to hear about. Lizzie, you've been doing some work on this, haven't you?
I think it's something that if you're already supplying supermarkets or retailers or whatever, really, you're going to be pushed in further in that direction. There's certain targets that the government have put on that we've all got to be meeting, and all businesses have got to be meeting. I think by 2050 we need to be, isn't it, carbon neutral or something like that. And as part of that, there's going to be greater pressure on retailers to, have carbon footprints for their products and become carbon neutral, so that they're not doing that. And so part of that would be using green energy, and that would kind of help to tick that box in that retailer's mind. But I think that it's not necessarily, I think it, like John said, it'll be a good talking point for you, but I think especially their current suppliers, they're going to be pushing them all to go this way going forwards.
I think you're right, Lizzie. I think the other thing there, Jadranka, is that so we could turn up and so say Promo as a supplier. Well, we are a supplier to supermarkets, of our consultancy services. But if we could turn up and say, hey, look what we're doing. We're using green energy. And we'd be very proud about it, and we'd be very keen to tell the customer what we were doing and how we were doing it and what the benefit was. And I think the customer might say, they might sit there and say, that's good, but that's what I expect. That's what I expect you to be doing. I don't, this is, sort of, I'm very pleased you're doing, but don't come and tell me how great you are. Tell me what you're going to do next, how you're going to improve. And actually, I expect this. I expect it. It's not. It's it will not be sort of anything too unusual. I expect it. I expect this. If you want to do business with us, this is what we want. This is what we expect. Chris, sorry, you were going to say.
Yeah, I was just going to say, really as well. If you were saying that, I'm able to grow this variety, which is very tasty, of apple or pomegranate or whatever it is, and it's we can do this at lower temperatures. It's giving us a much better carbon footprint, etc. The supermarket or the customer may say, good, but they may say, look, you don't understand, that's not the variety that we're wanting to sell. I've had exactly this particular issue with pomegranates, where a company in another part of the world saying, these pomegranates are really nice tasting, and we can do this, and it's so much more, environmentally friendly. And the customers it was in one of the European Union countries said, we want the variety wonderful. we're not interested in any other variety because we know that this is the variety that our customers like to buy. So I think the variety, it's great to do things with the green energy or whatever it is, but you've got to be supplying exactly what the customer wants, the right variety, the right size.
That goes back, Chris, to the sort of service package. Having fantastic environmental credentials is one thing, but you've also got to have a great product, good variety, good price, good, because one weak spot doesn't you can have sort of 7 things that are okay, but if you've got a weak spot, it negates everything else. So again, it's challenging, Jadranka, but it's again, it's sort of people around the world of the companies that really are committed to doing this type of business. I think that's as much as anything else. I think one of the things we sort of said on Tuesday was, how much do you want the UK market?
I have one question.
What are you prepared to do to enter the UK market and then stay in the UK market?
I think it's more difficult to stay. So stay in your business, then once you enter is okay, but managing that is not easy. We have 2 more questions because I don't want people not to be answered. They're not difficult, but it's a one in Serbian. What is the interest? Actually, this is the next session mentoring, which we'll have next week on the frozen, but maybe we can just quickly, what is the interest of British people for organic frozen fruits? Organic can be today fresh, which we have. Is that something growing market or is it a difficult market?
Yeah. Lizzie, do you want to talk about organics a little bit?
So I think organic sort of like, I guess it was pre-recession, it was booming, wasn't it? Which was sort of like I can't even remember when it was really booming. And then when people sort of had less money in their pocket, sales started to decline again. And at the moment, we've got double-digit inflation in terms of food prices. People are experiencing the cost of their supermarket shop, going up from sort of, they'd spend £80 a week. Now it's costing them £100 a week. One of the areas that they'll look to do is just drop down a tier in terms of what they're purchasing. So it's sort of like, say, 10 or 20p cheaper or something like that. So whereas organic might have been, it's at the top tier, they'll probably drop down one. So I'd need to look into the figures of it, but I would expect that organic at the moment is a challenging market to be in terms of frozen fruit within organic. I don't think there's loads of frozen fruit in that market. You kind of go into that area and there'd be one choice of mango, one choice of sort of pineapple, there'd be the mixed fruits, the stuff to go into your smoothies, and I guess I'd need to look into like the other supermarkets, but there wouldn't be a huge choice of organic frozen fruits there. So there's definitely an opportunity, I guess, which points to that aspect. But how challenging that market would be at the moment, I think it probably would be.
I think this is a great example, Jadranka, of one of the things we said on Tuesday was you need to become an expert on the UK market generally. You need to become an expert on the UK and the consumers and the customers and everything else that's going on in the country. So if you read the Sunday newspapers, and particularly the better quality Sunday newspapers, in their sort of consumer supplements, there'd be loads of articles about organic food. And you were sitting in southeastern Europe or any other part of the world, you'd say, wow, these people in the UK, they're eating organic food, like, as they say, like it's going out of fashion. That's all they're doing. They're eating loads and loads of. The reality is much different. And I think if you came across to the UK and went to a supermarket, you could look around, you'd see organic dairy products, you'd see organic meat products, you'd see you'd see quite a wide range of organic products. But you could go and look at the frozen fruit sector and say, well, okay, there'll be some organic products there, but it's not a big part of the category. And as Lizzie said, sort of during a sort of difficult economic time, one of the things that people might do is sort of stop buying organic products. But there's lots of organic food in the UK. Whether there's lots of organic frozen fruit, again, whether we need to go and do some checks.
We'll have a look for the next session. There's one more question which I already actually talk about taste. I didn't read that, but it's about jam. So For example, the question is about where do they buy their fruits for the jams? I believe is that market or consumer habits. What is the habit? We talk about it, about the taste British market. Do they buy more often domestic products or import ones? I think there is no percentage 50-50, but British market very open to whole world, I would say, is it not? Is that correct? They buy it from all over the world, everything.
Chris, you got any thoughts?
Okay. I think with the jams, we have one or two quite large jam manufacturers in this country, and some of it is local, and some of it is they will use perhaps maybe even second grade local, but they're importing quite a lot of frozen product. Poland's probably the main place they will be importing from. They have in the past been importing quite a lot of things like strawberry from Egypt, the frozen state. But Poland is by far the biggest supplier. They were importing some from Ukraine, but that obviously is there. But certain other parts of Eastern Europe, and it's an area that I believe that Peru and Chile are beginning to sort of sniff into as well. But at present, the majority is Poland. Poland is by far the biggest one for supplying the frozen fruits and so on for the jam market.
Again, I think it's in some ways. Excuse me, I do beg your pardon. But Lizzie talked about, when you go into a supermarket and you look at how many different types of oranges there or citrus there could be oranges, tangerines, clementines, lemons, limes. They can be sold loose. They can be sold in nets. They can be, they can be presented in all different ways. When you look at the jam section in the UK, there'll be own label, there'll be private label, there'll be jam which is sort of low sugar, so diabetic type jam. There might be some organic jam, seedless jam, seeded jam. It's again, I think this is it's a good indication of how mature the UK market is, and so that you could sort of say, well, actually, a mature market. What does that mean? There are no more opportunities? No, I mean, I think the way that people are sort of, if you look at your marketing textbook, Jadranka, in a mature market, what do? You segment the market. So you say,
segmentation is the number one. If you don't know the market, don't get it.
I haven't got just the standard product. I've got organic, seedless, diabetic jam. And that's a particular niche. So it's not the full market, it's just part of the market. But the opportunity to differentiate the product in a mature market, if you're, again, so you need to be good at making jam, but also here you need to be good at marketing. You need to be good at understanding consumers and what consumers want, and you need to be sort of clever at marketing. So it's not, to me, it's not just to me, the world is full of good people who can make great jam. It's whether can you be great at marketing.
In that case, there is a question, just because I'm really worried about the time. There's a question about the taste and what is the most favorite fruits for the jams. So
strawberry.
Is it that, Chris, for you? So it goes strawberry, which is the next.
Strawberry is the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah, strawberry and raspberry. No,
I'm not sure what comes number two, but strawberry is very definitely number one. And obviously, we eat quite a lot of marmalade as well in the UK. And there is a thing called the International Marmalade Festival, which is an incredibly eccentric English thing every year. I happen to be one of the patrons of it.
I tried one of the last year, Chris.
There's one commercial section, and that is highly fought over. And I remember being with one company, and they reckon winning that competition, having the best marmalade, meant they won the contract for providing Hilton worldwide with their jams.
There we are. Right.
So that's just the way these things go.
Yeah, Lizzie, what would you say? Which one is for you, for the British market, from your experience?
Yeah, I would say your strawberry is definitely the largest, but you've got so much out there. You go and look at the shelf, every sort of fruit will be on there that you can join from. And I know, like, from my point of view, I buy apricot if I'm doing some cooking, and if strawberry is for your toast and things like that. So there's an awful lot out there, but I would imagine strawberry is the largest, and it'll have a lot more tiers, whereas you'd only find, let's say, 1 or 2 choices of apricot jam, you'll find about 5 or 6 choices of your strawberry jam. And then there'll be sort of the private labels, and then you'll have the retailer owned labels as well. And some of those branded products will major on the fact that they're English made, or they're made from a certain sort of place. And I think there's kind of the heritage branding would sort of major there. So if you were to sort of place a brand on that shelf, it probably needs to have sort of a nice English sounding name on it to sort of chime with customers, really.
Thank you, Liz. John, I believe this is the time to close this session, and I would ask, what is your favorite flavor, John?
Look, it's interesting. I hope it's interesting. So yeah, I'd say that strawberry jam, I think, would be the most popular by quite a long time, by quite a long way. So you could say, I'm going to go and I'm going to produce a strawberry jam for the UK. Or, you know, there's part of the UK market that might be saying, this is the last thing we want. We've got enough.
Some new niche market.
We want something, we want something new and different, and there's some incredible new fruit flavor from Southeastern Europe that we're not familiar with. But again, yeah, it's all about doing your homework and doing your research and trying to understand what the customer wants, or where the gaps in the market might be. But again, you know, in terms of finding out about what jams, you go onto Tesco's website this morning, you could find out. And this is what's changed the world, I think, in the last sort of 5-10 years, maybe. You know, 10 years ago, you couldn't find this thing out. It was all a mystery. But these days, you know, anybody in Southeast Europe could go onto Tesco's website in the UK, and they could get a complete list of all the products they're selling, and what the size of the jars are, and how they're packaged, and how they're labelled. And also what they're being sold for, basically.
Or maybe John, Fortune and Mason, let's say, Harrods, lots of John Lewis, no, they're not doing, they have actually this. So there are lots of different, depends on segmentation of the market. You need really to do your study. You need to know, firstly, what product you have. You need to know where you're going to sell, who will buy your product.
That's right. And
without knowing your market, forget it. Then you have to satisfy all those key success factors. And then it's a long journey. But I'm sure, John, today, Lizzie and Chris, thank you very much for, again, about a very, very interesting session, mentoring, and also very nice talk about different angles and tastes. I am looking forward to see you next week again. We'll be speaking about the frozen. On this note, I would also like to thank my colleagues, Alex Muir and Tijana Markovic, who've been supporting us today with our wonderful people. We wouldn't be able to run everything smoothly. Also, I would like to say in our language, hvala vam puno svima danas na našem, nadam se, veoma korisnom webinaru, mentoring session. Za sva pitanja koje imate, molim vas, pošaljite Alex Muir ili pošaljite direktno meni. Vidimo se kasnije u 11 za premium products, a također sljedeće nedelje 13. i 14. Hvala vam puno, želim vam lep dan. Thank you very much, all of you.